everyone, it's Miss Sarah, and I'm going to read you an ELA story called The Shoemaker and the Elves. But first, let's go over our rules. Rule number 1, eyes are watching. Rule number 2, ears are listening. Let's turn on. Rule number 3, voices are quiet. Rule number 4, body is calm. All right. So, our story today is called The Shoemaker and the Elves. And here is the shoemaker and his wife. And they lived in a small village. They were kind people. And they worked hard each day to make fine leather shoes. The shoemaker cut the leather into small pieces and sewed them together to make each shoe. And his wife would place the shoes in the shop window. They normally have enough to eat dinner, but lately they became poor. Poor means they don't have enough money. And they worried, they were scared that they wouldn't have dinner to eat that night. So, the shoemaker had enough leather to make one more pair of shoes, and he so wished he would sell those shoes so that he could have some money for dinner. He finished up the shoes and he sat them down on the workbench. It had gotten very late, so he decided to sew the shoes in the morning. He left the workshop and went to bed. He hugged his wife before slipping off, before getting into bed. Early the next morning, the shoemaker woke up. He got ready to sew the last pair of shoes. I wonder what's going to happen. Oh. The shoes are sewn. When he got to his workbench, his eyes fell upon the beautiful pair of shoes he had ever seen. The shoemaker was puzzled over who could have made these beautiful shoes. What happened? The shoes were fixed. But who? Later that day, a customer came into the workshop and admired the beautiful shoes. He liked the beautiful shoes. They fit his feet so perfectly, the customer paid double the money for them. The customer liked the shoes so much that he paid a lot of money to get those shoes. The shoemaker smiled at his wife. "We now have enough money to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes," he said happily. There's even a little money left over so we can buy some food. Ooh, that makes them happy. They sold some shoes and can get more supplies to make more shoes and even have money left over for food. My pages aren't turning, friends. I'm so sorry. There we go. The next morning, the shoemaker woke up and saw two beautiful crafted pairs of shoes waiting on his workbench. The shoemaker could hardly believe what he saw. Before long, two customers came to his workshop and bought the shoes. They too were so thrilled with the shoes that they paid a handsome price, meaning they paid more for the shoes than what he was asking. The shoemaker and his wife now had enough money for 4 pairs of shoes and to buy some delicious bread for dinner. That night after dinner, the shoemaker cut the leather for 4 pairs of shoes and left it ready for the morning. He went to bed and slept well. Wonder what's going to happen. You think that their shoes are going to be done? I think so too. Let's see. Early the next morning, the shoemaker woke up and found 4 pairs of the most exquisite shoes waiting on the workbench. The shoemaker had sold all 4 pairs of shoes by lunchtime. He now had enough money to make 8 more pairs of shoes and to buy an apple pie for supper. And so it went on, night after night. The shoemaker cut the leather, and in the morning the shoes were ready to be sold. The shoemaker was puzzled and puzzled over who was making the shoes, but he could not figure it out. One evening, a few days before Christmas, the shoemaker had an idea. As he sat in front of the warm fire, he told his wife of the idea. Wonder who's helping him. We should stay up late that night and try to discover who is making the shoes, he said as the firelight flickered across his face. The shoemaker's wife agreed. So they stayed awake and hid behind the curtain to see who was making the shoes. As the clock struck midnight, the shoemaker and his wife saw 2 tiny elves dressed in tattered clothes enter the workshop. In a blink of an eye, they had scampered up onto the workbench. They picked up the cut leather and began to sew it together as if it was by magic. Before sun had risen, they were finished sewing the shoes. They placed them carefully on the workbench, and then they disappeared as quickly as they had came. The elves ran out into the cold, dark night with only their ragged clothes to keep them warm. The shoemaker's wife was worried about the elves. "I'd like to make them some nice warm clothes," she said to her husband as they ate breakfast. "Perhaps you could make them some tiny leather shoes to protect their feet from the cold." Oh, so to say thank you, the man and the woman are going to make clothes and shoes for the elves. The shoemaker and his wife set to work cutting and sewing the tiny clothes and shoes. That evening, after her husband had laid out the shoe leather, the shoemaker's wife placed the gifts on the bench. The tiny clothes and leather shoes looked beautiful in the lamplight. Once again, the shoemaker and his wife hid behind the curtain. I wonder what the elves are going to think of the clothes and the shoes. Let's see. At the stroke of midnight, the elves appeared. They were just about to begin their work when they noticed the gifts spread before them. They put on their new clothes and shoes and admired each other. Then, as quickly as they came, they were gone. The elves never came back again. But it didn't matter. The shoemaker and his wife were no longer poor. They lived happily together for the rest of their lives. The end. Oh, so since the woman and the man needed help, the elves helped them. And the woman and the man saw that the elves needed help, so they helped the elves. I hope you like that story. Until next time, bye.